We saw how we could use a promise chain, or actually use one await before another await, either with then or using async await. But what if we have two endpoints where we don't have to get one before the other? We could basically get them simultaneously. We don't care which one we end up getting first. We just want to get two sets of data. So here is two endpoints. Let's actually make it a little bit easier. Let's do a const products URL, and let's do a const. We've got companies URL, and that's going to be this one over here. So we've got these two, and one's not dependent on the other like our user detail was. So in this case, let's actually do this two separate ways. Let's clear this out. So what we could end up doing here is, if we don't care about what the order is, instead of putting this in a promise chain, we could do something called Promise.all. So Promise.all takes an array of promises, and we can end up using the fetch API to say that what we want to do is we want to fetch the products URL, and we want to do another fetch of the companies URL, and this ends up giving us back a promise. And again, we could do this with async await as well. So this is going to give us some responses, and just for now, I'll just console.log the responses. If we go over here, we run this, and let's just make sure I don't have a misspelling. This is just, let's call it response. And it's going to be an array of two responses. So again, we'll only end up getting to this point if both these end up getting satisfied. And what we can end up doing here is that now we want to end up getting both responses. So we can do another Promise.all. And what we have here, we have two responses. So just for the sake of argument, let's go over here and let's take response0.json, and we'll have one set of data here. Right, since the first one that we ended up putting in here was the products URL, we should end up having just the data for our products. And if we went over here and we did the second one, we would end up having the data for our companies. So what if we wanted to end up getting both of them? Well, what we could do is we could take this response and we could do a Promise.all. And we could basically take this response and we could end up mapping it. So let's call this R for response. We're going to end up mapping it, and we'll say R.json. And let's make sure that we have the right parentheses here. And so here, we're going to end up getting back our data. And our data, since this is now two other promises that are being satisfied, and we look at this, we're going to see that our data is going to be first the products and then the companies. So if we wanted to console.log here, we could also destructure this as well. But we could go over here and say const companies equals data, right? And that's going to be the second one. And we could say products equals data 0. So if we wanted to see the first product, we could say products 0 dot name, and we would see its foo. If we wanted to see its price, since that's another value that we get from this API, actually I think it's suggested price, if I'm not mistaken. We could see the suggested price. And so the big takeaway here is that if you have two promises, and one's not dependent upon the other. You really don't need to wait for one to be complete before you end up getting the other one. And so if you end up putting this in a Promise.all, you'll end up getting your response. And in this case, since we are using the Fetch API, we're going to use another API that'll make this a little bit easier to do. But since we are using the Fetch API, we now have these two other promises that we end up getting in our response. And let's actually just maybe make this a little bit more clear. Let's call this responses because we have two of them. The key is that they come back in order. So this is responses, and this is responses, and we'll end up getting the same results. And even here, let's actually call this results, 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 and this should give us the same thing.